again, and it is my pleasure to announce officially the opening of the Mediation and Law Forum. Today and tomorrow and the day after, we're going to be discussing the major issues on the agenda. Yesterday was a very strong kickoff with the International Mediation Institute, and now we are moving to the core part of the forum. It is my pleasure and privilege to hand over the floor to Oksana Tsymbrivska, who is the team lead of the EU Pravo-Justice project, to make an official opening of today's forum, please. Thank you so much, Luiza. Good morning and good afternoon to someone, dear participants. This is the VIII International Forum called Mediation and Law. On behalf of the EU-led Pravo-Justice project as co-organizers of it, we have a great honor and privilege to welcome you here at this large-scale forum on mediation. We have gathered at this forum to not only consider retrospectively of what's been done over the last 30 years in Ukraine and actually celebrate some of these accomplishments, which are many. You have just demonstrated how much has been done over this time, but at the same time, we'd like to take a look into the future. We're going to discuss some of the prospects for mediation developments in the context of Ukraine's European integration, as well as relevant trends in mediation developments. Ukraine today exists in two different paradigms. There is war on the one hand, and there is European integration on the other. So on the one hand, for almost 2.5 years, we've been into the war, and of course, this is a great, if not the greatest challenge for the entire country and the nation. At the same time, the war and the European integration are great catalysts for transformation and change, both in the justice sector as well as in the institutional capacity building and alternative dispute resolution. I think we're witnessing today how mediation is apt to acquire new sense and new significance in Ukraine. It's going to help resolve conflicts and build sustainable society in the country. When talking about challenges, of course, there are so many challenges that the Ukrainian justice sector witnesses and has to deal with. At the same time, there is a conviction that the largest challenge ever today, this is the challenge which has to do with crisis management and providing for the judicial human resources. And I'm convinced it is the judiciary that has to become one of the most apparent stakeholder of mediation implementation in Ukraine, and should be the primary voice that is going to disseminate all these success stories about mediation. Awareness building has key important role to play because we need to generate demand for mediation. Once people understand the advantages of mediation, and once they easily can find mediation, they're going to understand the great thing it can do for them. Last year, our project supported the establishment of a communication strategy on mediation. And today, it is honestly very pleasant for me to say that the judicial sector takes lead in implementing this communication strategy, and it runs a communication campaign to disseminate advantages of mediation. Last but not least, let me tell a couple of words about the future and about the trends that are most important and apparent that we're going to discuss during the forum. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that within the discussions that we are going to have within, under the today's and tomorrow's forum, it's important to realize that the most progressive, best judicial systems are always under constant change. They have to be developing and adapting to new challenges as well as needs of the society. Alternative dispute resolution practices will be an important trend in the current contemporary judicial system, and they are sources of innovation. Those new approaches to mediation, like online mediation and other techie solutions, they have to be, I'm convinced, integrated into our justice system, comprehensively contributing to its development and upgrading. Of course, this will contribute to much better access to justice for all citizens. And for me, the brightest example of how mediation can really contribute to change in justice and how dynamic it is sometimes, especially in the context of the Ukraine's agenda, this is the administrative case mediation. In 2017, our project did a survey regarding administrative services and mediation. So, mediation is recommended for administrative cases, and it is fully capable of contributing to resolution. They used to say it's nice, but it works only in the EU, not in Ukraine. It's not realistic here. But today, if we take a look at today's agenda, we can see that in administrative cases, mediation plays the key role. At least this is a discussion that is underway, and this is a relevant trend that takes place today. This is the best practice that we want to foster in Ukraine, and it is today that administrative courts that have become the real drivers and catalysts of this change. And it's really nice to observe. I honestly want to wish you very fruitful discussions within the forum. And undoubtedly, I want to assure you that for our project, it is so important that we support mediation development and to disseminate its capability, so to say. We need to raise awareness among the population that there are alternative dispute resolutions, and therefore we will build the culture of amicable resolutions. Thank you so much, and I want to wish you very productive discussions during the day. All right, Oksana, thank you so much for this entire contribution that you've been doing into the mediation development in Ukraine. Justice for All program, and Irina Zaretsky was speaking yesterday. We're so much grateful to our co-organizers and partners for this USAID's program, because for many years you have been contributing so much to developing the Ukrainian justice in general, including mediation. So I would suggest to move to our first panel discussion. This is going to be on the international and national dimensions in implementing mediation. Oksana, back to you. Thank you so much, Luiza. Yes, indeed, like I already mentioned, today mediation is under its European integration agenda. This is something new, really. Once negotiations started, this has become a challenge for government agencies. And it is important for us to understand how this process is going to go, and what's the place that mediation is going to take, and how important it's going to be in this process. Let me hand over the floor to Manfredas Limantas, the Rule of Law Policy Lead at the European Commission's Ukraine Service, to actually discuss this issue in more detail. Today, Ukraine develops a roadmap, the rule of law roadmap, and this is negotiation section 23. This process is ongoing. I'd like to ask you, Manfredas, if you can tell me a bit more about this process and what has to be taken into consideration by the Ukrainian side to prepare a high-quality roadmap, and what's the place that mediation can play in this process. Thank you. Over to you, Manfredas.
Manfredas?
Manfredas?
Чи було чутно моє запитання, пане Манфредесе?
Could you hear my question?
Можливість Манфредесу голосом.
If you can please let Manfredas speak up. Good morning, dear colleagues. Oksana, so nice to see you again.
Вітання з Брюсселя.
Welcome from Brussels.
Не знаю, чи буде зручніше.
I'm not sure if it's more convenient if I speak Ukrainian or let us move to English.
Можна англійською мовою, у нас є
You can
синхронний
do it in
переклад,
English. We have
так буде
simultaneous translation
швидше і
available. I think it's
оперативніше.
going to be faster this way.
Можемо. Dear colleagues,
Sure.
thank you so much for the invitation to attend this great event, the VIII International Mediation Forum. Very pleased to at least digitally see you all. On my side, I would just like to maybe indeed present you the state of play in Ukraine's journey towards the EU, to the EU, let's say, membership, and to take stock of the many achievements of Ukraine, of all of you on this meaningful path. So, well, first of all, I would like to say that ever since the Revolution of Dignity, Ukraine has really undertaken many structural reforms across all areas of public life, including, of course, the justice system. I have a very long list of reforms that could be mentioned here, but just let me give you a couple of examples. Ukraine has modernized its procedural codes, adopted a new modern law on probation, new law on bankruptcy. It has improved selection procedures for judges. It has modernized the judicial governance system, and even more, it has reformed the way how the main judicial governance bodies are selected, involving international independent experts in the selection process, reinforcing integrity and professionalism check in this process. Ukraine has also improved substantially the selection of constitutional court judges, again involving independent experts in the pre-selection procedure, and there have been many more notable achievements over the last years. This great reform effort has not been stopped by the Russian full-scale invasion. You have proven to be extremely resilient and committed, and you continue really to impress us all by pursuing a very ambitious reform agenda. And here I can mention, of course, the ongoing work to select judges of the Constitutional Court, the establishment of the service of disciplinary inspectors for judges, and the upcoming reforms related to the selection of new judges of administrative court in Kiev, and e-judiciary related developments, and so on and so forth. So this is truly remarkable. And of course, last but not least, mediation should be added to the list of achievements. A new modern mediation law was adopted, opening the way to mainstream mediation in the resolution of various disputes, civil, administrative, commercial disputes, and even some criminal disputes could be resolved by way of mediation. And as Oksana mentioned, reinforcing access to justice for citizens, for businesses, and reducing the workloads of courts. And we are also very well aware that courts suffer from severe understaffing, underfunding, further exacerbated by the ongoing Russian aggression, and all the challenges coming with it. So indeed, alternative dispute resolution is one of the ways to maintain access to justice, while also unloading a little bit the formal judicial system. So let me now say a few words about the current state of play with the EU accession. So first and foremost, coming from Lithuania, I should tell you that EU accession, if done properly, is the most powerful transformational process that a country can have. Lithuania over the last 20 years has changed tremendously largely thanks to the EU accession, thanks to being part of the EU, and we have multiple studies proving our achievements. So in all areas where there is an EU policy or EU law, Lithuania has really made significant progress, whereas in areas where there is limited EU acquis, as we call limited EU law, EU guidance, the progress has been somewhat more limited. So my suggestion to you is to embrace fully all these positive effects that EU accession brings to the country, to carry out this EU accession process in a high quality, in a well-prepared and inclusive manner, because this ultimately will bring significant effects to the Ukrainian citizens, businesses, investors, public administration, and so on. So at the moment, as you know, thanks to this major reform achievements that I have just listed, the EU member states agreed to open accession negotiations with Ukraine in June. Last month, basically, the first intergovernmental conference between the EU member states and Ukraine took place, and officially the accession negotiations have started. At the moment, we are at the process of screening, the so-called screening of Ukraine's alignment with EU law and policies. We will be having the screening meeting with the Ukrainian partners already in September, where they will present to us, to the European Commission, the level of alignment of Ukraine with EU law and policies in the area of justice, anti-corruption, and fundamental rights. And then further screening meetings will then take place in the next months, and they will cover all areas of public life and public policies. So we are now preparing actively for this screening meeting on the judiciary, anti-corruption, and fundamental rights. Is in particular, Ukrainian authorities are preparing presentations, written information for us. Following this meeting, we will be then developing the screening report that will list concretely the issues, the remaining problems, gaps, and of course will contain recommendations how these gaps can be addressed. On the basis of this screening report, the roadmap, which Oksana already mentioned, will be then developed by Ukraine, and it will lay out in a prioritized and sequenced manner all the reforms that have to be carried out over the course of several years to basically address the problems identified during the screening process. And then on the basis of the roadmap, we will of course define the interim requirements or benchmarks, as we call them, for the accession negotiations in this area of judiciary, anti-corruption, and fundamental rights. We call it Chapter 23, pre-accession Chapter 23. So the interim requirements or benchmarks will be defined and largely drawing on the findings of the screening report and the roadmap. And then we will be supporting Ukraine in the implementation of this interim pre-accession conditions. And once they are implemented, we will move to defining the closing benchmarks, the closing pre-accession conditions for the Chapter 23, and again supporting Ukrainian efforts in implementing these particular reforms, and hopefully soon these conditions will be implemented, and we will be able to recommend to the EU member states the closure of negotiations in this particular chapter. And a similar process then will take place across all the different chapters of public policy. We have, I think, more than 30 such chapters. But I must stress that the chapter 23 that pertains to judiciary, anti-corruption, and fundamental rights is considered one of the fundamental chapters. So the pace of reforms, the progress achieved in this chapter will define the overall pace of accession negotiations, and usually these fundamental reforms are then enjoying a very, very high attention of our member states, of the Commission, of course, and therefore your work particular will be very important in speeding up and ensuring a smooth accession process for Ukraine, and we will, as I mentioned, be supporting you along this way. So, in a nutshell, you see that what we are doing now is a certain chain where one step is followed by another, and we of course will be very happy to cooperate with all of you in the course of the coming months to ensure that at the end of this chain we have really a good quality outcomes, a good quality roadmap that responds to the realities on the ground, to the challenges, that contains realistic, credible reforms, and of course that is then properly implemented in practice. And mediation, of course, as well will be part of the screening report, of the roadmap, and hopefully also will be part of the pre-accession benchmarks, either interim or closing. So this event also serves for discussing the key challenges and ways to address them, and of course then this will be reflected in the screening process. In particular, I think there is a need to focus on the full implementation of the framework law on mediation, ensuring that mediation is really mainstreamed in practice, that courts are having recourse to mediation for the parties, and promotion of training, of course, building capacities of social services, all other members of the public administration at local and central level, so that mediation is really promoted across the board. There is also a need to improve data collection on mediators, on mediation, to strengthen the self-governance of mediation, mediation associations, ethical standards for them, and so on and so forth. And well, as I mentioned, the EU accession offers a perfect framework for that. So please use it. I know that the government will be engaging the civil society, professional associations, including lawyers, in the development of the roadmap. So indeed, take part actively in these efforts. Provide your recommendations. Be proactive in shaping the pre-accession reform agenda for Ukraine. And I'm sure that we will all then succeed in having a good quality reform process, and will help Ukraine become an EU member state very soon. So thank you so much for again inviting me, and looking forward to this panel discussion, and wish you all the best in the coming days. Thanks.
Дуже дякую, Манфредесе. Насправді,
Thank you so much, Manfredas.
Манфредес є дуже добрим
Actually,
другом, я б
Manfredas
сказала,
is a great
України,
friend of
який
Ukraine.
протягом років
He's been
допомагає
supporting us
в
for
процесі
so many
реформ,
years in both the reform
процесі
processes
інтеграції. Тому
and also
велика
now
подяка
in the European
за
integration process. So we
чергові
want to thank you so much
за за цей внесок
for
в
your
Україну.
contribution
І з приводу
for the
вашої
benefit of
презентації,
Ukraine.
дуже, я думаю, важливо було
And I think
зрозуміти,
one of the most
що
important
це
things from
загальна
your
рамка, як
intervention
воно буде
is to understand that this is a
проводити,
general framework. The way it's going to work
інструмент медіації у цьому
and
шляху.
where
І
mediation
насправді,
can play
на
its
моє
role, that's an
переконання,
important
зараз
thing to
є
consider.
дуже
I'm
гарне
convinced
вікно
that there is
можливостей для
a
того,
great
щоб
window of
стратегічно
opportunity
глянути на
to take a
питання
strategic
реформ,
look at
як
the
ми
reform
плануємо
agenda,
рухатися у
the way we
найближчі
would plan
5
to move
років,
forward
і
in the
яке
next
місце
5 years,
медіації
and
і
what's the
іншим
place that
конструктивним
mediation
альтернативним способом
and other
вирішення
alternative dispute
спорів
resolution
закладаємо на
options
цьому шляху,
can
щоб воно
play
теж
on this
відповідало
path
і
so it
європейським
complies
стандартам.
with the best
Дякую,
European
пане
standards and
Манфредесе.
practices. Thank you, Mr.
Передаю
Manfredas.
слово далі пані Луїзі.
Now over to Luiza back again.
Так, дякую за те, що ввели нас такий, знаєте,
Thank you very
європейський
much
контекст.
for introducing this European context and for sharing this understanding where we're supposed to go. And of course, mediation, as we understand, is fully in line with those values that a European Union tries to push forward. And let us move to our national level. It is my pleasure to give the floor to Babiy, who is the member of the Ukraine's parliament, and he is the chairman of the parliamentary subcommittee on legal policies. This is the subcommittee that is taking care of alternative dispute resolution options. So welcome, Mr. Babiy.
Я одразу
Доброго
хочу,
дня.
знаєте, таки
And
направити
let me direct you a little bit into the discussion. First of all, in March this year, the committee had the hearings. It was not just the regular hearings to tick the box, it was a 2-day hearing focused on alternative dispute resolution. And its name of the hearings, it was titled Ways to Peace, Challenges and Prospects for Alternative Dispute Resolution in Current Conditions. So I'm going to encourage you, Roman, to share some of those insights and key findings, recommendations, and conclusions from the committee hearings, because a lot of questions that were very, very relevant had been raised before that hearing. Please, hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Luiza, for this introduction and the question as well.
Хотів би почати з того, що
I'd like to
подякувати
start by
організаторам.
expressing my words of sincere gratitude to the organizers of the today's event. Thank you so much for communicating with us, and despite the really challenging situation with a full-scale invasion, despite this very baffling task or situation with electricity supplies, even though we're online, of course, offline would be much better, but it's so difficult to gather such a high representation of so many experts. Even online, it takes effort to organize, because you've been investing so much resources and communication and effort into organizing such similar activities. With regards to your question directly, on March 27th, 28th, there were committee hearings, like you mentioned. And it is, well, the committee hearings, as always, they were about alternative dispute resolution. And the scale of the issue and interest to it were evidenced by the fact that we had 2 days of the hearings. It's not happening frequently like this. And the hearings were 4 to 5 years long. And in one of the days, we were talking more specifically about mediation and also dispute resolution with the participation of a judge. Why we decided to have a hearing like this? Because for more than 2 years into the war, our life has radically changed. Of course, those changes also affected the alternative dispute resolution framework and mediation as well. So that's why we decided to gather experts who do with arbitration and mediation, and to understand, to check the notes and to understand what the problems are, which are brand new over the last years, what are the solutions that are possible, what are the prospects to resolve those disputes alternatively, and to define where we have to go together and where the effort is most crucial. Which issues are more relevant, which are less, and therefore we wanted to coordinate our joint effort from the entire community, including government and international partners. And yes, thank you. Thanks to the international partners, they're really eager to help and have been doing so much for us. We wanted to make sure we move to those advantages that alternative dispute resolution can provide to our citizens.
Ви знаєте, я думаю, що оця тематика антиконституційних спорів по значущості тих питань, які підіймаються, особливо за нинішніх умов,
especially in today's environment, deserves even parliamentary hearings, not just committee hearings. We're going to, of course, try to organize that, but for objective reasons, we do not run any parliamentary hearings. In peacetime, though, it's highly possible and probable. We're going to come back to it, I'm sure.
Власне, в результаті слухань
As a result of the hearings,
отримали багато інформації,
we received a lot of information, which was very useful. There has been a lot of good insights, both involving commercial arbitration, including international, and the jury trials, as well as mediation and litigation. Let me tell you a bit about mediation. We've been discussing a lot of proposals, and we were discussing the issue of establishing an interagency platform to foster mediation, not only mediation, but also other alternative dispute resolution options, to more effectively coordinate the efforts of all the relevant stakeholders.
Визначили, що необхідне сприяння
We figured out that there is need to collect statistics on mediation.
Визначили, що доцільно затвердити державний стандарт соціальної послуги медіації.
We thought it would be appropriate to actually set up the national mediation service delivery standard. There have been public discussions already.
Фінальні етапи ця процедура проходить.
And this procedure is at its final stage.
Відзначили важливість того, що
We also underlined the importance of regular taking stock of the international best practices.
Визначили доцільність
Also defined the importance
органи державної влади
and the appropriateness that government agencies take a unified approach on how to communicate mediation, not in silos, but in a coordinated manner that is going to contribute to much more efficient developments, including with the use of this communication strategy on mediation that Oksana Tsymbrivska has mentioned, developed by the EU-led Pravo-Justice project. Another important issue that was raised to expand opportunities for mediation out there under those enforcement actions.
Піднімали, зокрема, приватні виконавці.
There was enforcement officers were raising this issue.
Медіації у спорах, що виникають з договорів, у разі, якщо
we were discussing different kinds of disputes
чи уклали медіаційну угоду. Ну, по аналогії з Тартейським
and mediation agreements that can be concluded in the dispute resolution process. It was pointed out that it is important to foster mediation for commercial and consumer-related disputes. We need to actually foster more restorative justice practices for young offenders. This program was piloted, and now it has to be run in a full-fledged manner because the Ministry of Justice already ordered that last year. The pilot has proven its efficiency, so it's high time to actually run it smoothly in a holistic manner. So all those materials are there. There has been a lot of material presented to the participants of the hearings, many of whom actually take part in today's forum. So the committee has processed all that information, and we already drafted recommendations as a result of the committee hearings,
будуть винесені на подальше затвердження
which
комітету.
will be further submitted for the committee's approval. Since this is a draft, they may be amended, but in general, the trend will remain to be as it was. And in the nearest next week's committee meeting, hopefully the recommendations will be approved.
Що попередньо рекомендується на розгляд комітету?
Preliminarily, what's recommended for the committee's consideration,
Комерційного арбітражу.
if we take the
я
commercial
загалом все,
arbitration,
згадаю,
well,
оскільки
I'm going to mention all of them because
медіація, але,
we are
звичайно,
talking about mediation, but of course we
інші
have to
способи
mention some
забезпечення.
other alternative dispute resolution options.
Ну, конкретніше зупинюсь на медіації, звичайно.
I'm going to talk,
По
of
лінії
course,
комерційного арбітражу
more
це,
precisely about
напрацювання
mediation.
договорів.
Regarding commercial arbitration,
Вірніше так, аналіз тих норм в
we try to
процесі.
take stock of all the norms and processes, especially in the civil proceeding, that have to do with the international commercial arbitration. They were started in 2017. Of course, they have to be revisited and improved based on the effectiveness analysis or efficiency analysis. So the committee needs to continue its work on this part. We're also considering regarding the arbitration courts. The law was passed 3411. The bill was passed in the first reading. The participants ruled that this has to be revisited and updated. With regards to the draft law 10447 was registered at the beginning of this year. It's about the labor and family disputes that can be resolved with the judge, through the judge. So the committee also decided to update that one. So the committee also suggested to improve the procedure for referring the case for the dispute to be resolved through the judge or with the participation of the judge, to translate literally. It's quite large, actually. There's large text.
На превеликий жаль,
And unfortunately,
він ще не прийнятий в першому читанні.
it's not yet
Там є
passed the
досить,
first reading.
чимала кількість, скажімо так,
There is
дискусійних
quite a
питань,
substantial
якраз,
number of disputable
які,
issues,
не влаштовують всі фракції в Верховній Раді.
which not all the factions in the parliament are okay with. The discussion is still out there. It's more about the procedure itself, so probably we want to think about how to split it into pieces. Maybe we're going to split it into parts, and we're going to submit those parts which do not trigger major concerns from the parliamentary factions. Or possibly we can actually develop more radical change or amendment to this bill. Of course, we're going to get together in the committee involving the experts, mediators, and judges, and international project representatives for this purpose. One of the other recommendations is to develop amendments to the civil procedure code involving mediation if there is a mediation clause and mediation agreement signed by the parties. And of course, given the outcomes of the parliamentary hearings, there is a recommendation to regularly have discussions like this in the committee on the development and prospects of and challenges of the alternative dispute resolution practices.
Певні рекомендації, звичайно,
Some of those recommendations are suggested to be given to the Cabinet of Ministers and the Ministry of Economy.
Вірніше, пропонувати чи рекомендувати.
We recommended
укладення договорів між державою і інвестором.
When there is an agreement between the state and the investor, there can be arbitration clauses included.
Приватного партнерства
or
у проектах відповідних угод, які
or
містять,
reservations included
якщо вони містять
into those agreements.
включати відповідні застереження.
Those reservations have to be included into those agreements, or at least give the option for this clause to be included. Because there is an arbitration commission at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It is also suggested to create an interagency council on alternative dispute resolution to more effectively communicate and coordinate and develop this area. This will allow us joining the efforts of both government actors and other stakeholders. The recommendations that I've just mentioned included, like I said, the national classification, where mediation service is going to be included.
Рішення щодо цього пілотного проєкту, про який я знову ж таки згадував.
And again, there was a decision on this pilot project that I mentioned about the young offenders.
Державний стандарт соцпослуги.
The National Social Service Delivery Standard to contribute to its approval. We also want to develop amendments to the law on enforcement proceedings. There are some good ideas about mediation in the enforcement proceedings. Like I said, we want to develop a draft law.
Це спільне буде завдання, мабуть.
This is going to be a joint effort, I'm sure, for the Parliament, the Committee, and the Cabinet. The draft law on
між споживачем і суб'єктом господарювання.
Alternative dispute resolutions between consumers and legal entities.
Адміністрації також пропонується рекомендувати сприяти розробці механізму.
So we want to contribute to this
регулювання спору з участю судді у навантаженні суддів, оскільки ця проблематика згадувалась і суддів в тому числі.
Dispute resolution in the view to relieve the caseload on the courts, because the judges will spend time, but this is not actually considered as his or her caseload. There was a recommendation to improve the reporting templates in administrative and civil proceedings by expanding information and including information on alternative dispute resolution or judicial dispute resolution. We've seen reports on the different categories of cases and their outcomes. Amicable resolution statistic is also available, so we considered that one. So this is in a nutshell what we have discussed so far, and so far this is a draft recommendation, like I said. So I think I've delivered all the information in pretty much detail. So we expect positive decisions by the committee. Hopefully it's going to be there, maybe with some of the amendments, possibly, but I think the core part of it will remain to be the same, I'm sure. Thank you so much, Roman. This is huge work that you've done together with the committee members, and I'm sure this is an important marker. And this is an indicator that mediation is recognized by the state and it's being supported. So, spending 2 days into the committee hearings to dive into mediation and alternative dispute resolution issues, given you have so many daily issues that you have to consider and work out, that's very important. It's a very important indicator how great perception is about mediation and how it is growing. And I'm so grateful to you for taking stock of the preliminary conclusions from the parliamentary hearings. I'm sure most of them will be reflected just as is in the finalized recommendations. Thank you so much. Luiza, could I say something on top of that? If I'm not mistaken, it was the first time when we were discussing ADR that much. And the scope of the discussion showed us that even 2 days would not be enough to discuss that in a profound manner. So, of course, this is going to be an issue on the agenda. Thanks a lot. Yes, indeed, the work that has been going on is great. Sometimes it's not that visible, though. And even your recommendation on building a coordination platform. This is exactly reflecting the situation, because sometimes one single government agency will not suffice to give proper consideration to any given issue. Today, it is even difficult for me to tell a single government body that could be blind to mediation or potentially would not consider it as an option. Thank you so much, and can't wait for the approved recommendations. And over to Oksana. Back to you, please. Thank you, dear colleagues. Let us proceed. I would like to give the floor to Alexander Banchuk, Deputy Minister of Justice. The Ministry of Justice has played a crucial role in the context of mediation developments in Ukraine. And it was the Ministry of Justice and the working group that was set up there under the auspices of the Justice Ministry. They finally passed the mediation law in Ukraine, the framework law that we have today. In 2021, it was done. And already now, during the enforcement of this law, the Ministry of Justice has been running so many initiatives. This is in the context of primary legal aid. They also do a lot in terms of restorative justice for young offenders. Alexander, can you tell us a bit more about the initiatives that are now in the Ministry of Justice's pipeline and how significant they are for Ukraine? It would also be valuable to hear about some of the plans that the ministry has for the future. We would be great if you can share those as well with us, please. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. Hopefully you can hear me and see me. Yes, we can hear you and see you. Sorry, I'm on the move, so excuse me for the poor quality of the sound and the picture. Thank you very much, Oksana, for making a very good introduction. In fact, I only need to confirm everything that you've said. It's so nice to see everybody. I can see by the number of participants, you have more than 300 people on board with you today. That's an impressive figure, isn't it? This is showing us that even despite Russia's full-scale aggression against Ukraine, we continue to think not only about daily business and challenges and threats and dangers, but we also think about the future. The future is what we're fighting for, and this is important to understand. Coming back to our discussion, let me come back to some of the three top areas that we're trying to push forward in terms of mediation. Number one, this is again about the framework law and its enforcement. We also keep track of how it is being enforced. This is a monitoring exercise for us. The second part is related to the fact that mediation and European integration contexts, plus the negotiations that the previous speakers have mentioned, that's an important area. And the third part is practical projects that are important for enforcing the framework mediation law. When talking about the first dimension, about keeping track of the enforcement of this legislation, you're probably aware that together with the other partners, we're trying to develop the online monitoring platform to keep track of the legal enforcements. And there are other parts that give an opportunity to all the practitioners, those who apply the law, the legislation, including on mediation, to troubleshoot whatever problems they find in the legal enforcement. So in this first part, if you haven't yet joined the platform, please do so. This is going to be one of the ways to communicate with the Ministry of Justice and the other stakeholders in the sphere of law. Actually, as a result of this monitoring process, we published a preliminary report. It's a preliminary one, though, and we were trying to take stock of how the mediation law has been enforced. This is not a standalone process. This is an ongoing one. So whenever there are any issues taking place, including in mediation, we're going to be ready to investigate those issues, try to analyze where the problem is, whether the problem is in the law or its implementation or in its communication, whatever. And therefore, we're going to produce recommendations on how to resolve the possible issues. And when necessary, we will also engage legislative leverage. That's the first part. The second part, with regards to the European integration, the previous speakers have already mentioned that there are processes underway. Some of the other processes are scheduled for September and October this year. We're going to have the first bilateral meetings with the European Commission and Ukraine regarding chapters 23 and chapter 24. The 23 is justice, and the 24, those have to do with human rights primarily. And one of those, because since we understand the issues that we have to work on in view of this European integration, we're going to develop the reforms roadmap. And mediation is going to be one of the integral parts of this reform agenda. That is why, in collaboration with the other stakeholders and government agencies and subject matter experts, we're going to be suggesting the part on mediation to be included as an integral part of our justice reforms agenda. What needs to be understood, from our preliminary analysis or screening, there is an EU directive of 2008 on some of the mediation aspects in the civil and commercial cases. Obviously, we'll have to revisit how provisions and goals of this directive are transposed into the Ukrainian legislation. And I'm sure we're going to introduce more amendments to the Ukrainian legislation to align it with the European directive. It's going to be part of this process. And the third part that I was alluding to, this has to do with the practical issues, because we not only want to be the one who writes the rules and analyzes those, but we also try to be an entity that applies those rules and innovations. Mr. Roman has talked about the recovery program from 2019 until now. This is a restorative justice project for young offenders in criminal cases. As a result of this pilot project, we can certainly say that such number as 375 minors, those who benefited from mediation already, and they were not incarcerated. Alternative sentencing options were applied for them, and they were free from criminal liability. I said, even if we never had 375 children, but only one, and we improved this child's future, it means we've done a great job. But in this situation, we have 375 children. These days, during the forum, the updated program has already been signed. It's going to be the program involving not only the Office of Prosecutor General, but also, not only the Prosecutor General's office and the Ministry of Justice, but also now it's going to include the Ministry of Interior. So investigators from the Ministry of Interior will also take part in the program implementation. And I'm sure this is going to be a great contribution to the overall program success in the future. These days, while we're having this forum, this program is going to be signed, and it's going to be called Restorative Justice Program. So hopefully this is already a considerable milestone for us, and we're trying to run everything in full accordance to the parliamentary hearing outcomes. This updated program is not for nothing. First of all, there is already a register of mediators that is maintained by the legal aid centers. And as of the recent data, we have 104 mediators all over Ukraine who now do their job. And even though we face challenging environment, there is already budget funding to engage these mediators to deliver their services. So after this joint decree was published, prosecutors and investigators from the police may now suggest to the suspects and young offenders an alternative option. You can go through this program as an alternative to incarceration, or they can also apply other alternative options, which also means that there is funding and there are mediators who are ready to get involved in this process. And another part that we want to implement in practice under the juvenile justice reform agenda, we want to start with the pilot project, of course, in family disputes. We also want to implement mediation as one of the dispute resolution tools. This has to be done with the support of the Ministry of Social Policy, but we consider this as one of the national strategy items. It is intended till 2028, and it must be implemented, I'm sure. But before we provide all the regulatory frameworks, we are ready to run a pilot project on this. So this is in a nutshell what we're now doing, what kind of initiatives we'll run today. We all do this with understanding how important this is. And it contributes greatly to the overall justice reform. And with mediation, I'm sure we're going to have much brighter future than we do today. Thank you. Every success to you.
Дуже дякую, пане Олександре.
Thank you so much, Alexander.
Ви дуже чітко
You have very clearly outlined all the dimensions and areas that the ministry is pursuing today, and it's so nice to realize that there is strategic level, like European integration and legislative monitoring, and there is also operational. You see, and you keep you keep the hands-on approach to the legislative change so that legislators can actually rapidly respond to whatever challenges they face. And thank you for listing the initiatives by the Ministry of Justice today. It's so valuable because actually we were saying the other day that the mediation law has not received a great buy-in like we all expected. We were just underestimating some of those outcomes. But I think if we put it on paper and list everything that's been done, there's so many accomplishments and achievements. And we have to be proud of that. Not only criticize ourselves, but also be proud sometimes, given the conditions we had to face, like the war and all other turmoil situations for the system of justice, for the state and for its institutions. So I think we sometimes have to be proud of ourselves, not only keep moaning. I'm sure there are a lot of steps that are going to follow in the future. Thank you so much for your participation, and we're going to continue working with you together in the future as well in this area. And now I'd like to move to another important speaker, Mr. Rimantas Simaitis. He is an expert of the CEPEJ, the European Commission on Efficiency of Justice. He also worked as part of the working group on mediation. CEPEJ, in terms of mediation, its work on mediation has been huge in the context of those recommendations that had been developed by the working group. And Ukraine was relying on these recommendations a lot when drafting the mediation law, and now when we are implementing it, we're also heavily relying on it. Mr. Rimantas, you as a member of the working group, you're very much aware of all the recommendations and the tools that have been developed. Which of these tools could you describe in particularly as important ones so that Ukraine could pay much more attention to those? And maybe you can also reflect some of the best international practices that Ukraine could borrow to successfully push mediation forward. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Oksana, for introduction. I'm happy to be here with you and to share my experience and experience of the Council of Europe and European Commission for Efficiency of Justice of the Council of Europe, CEPEJ, in the field of mediation. Yes, I will try to touch upon this question that you underlined very rightly. Is there any tool of among many tools which were developed by the Council of Europe in field of mediation, which might be very instrumental and useful for your country? But it is not very easy, well, question and answer. So most probably the answer will be a little bit more complicated. But starting with my presentation, let me share with you a screen. I have a PPT presentation also put together. Let me see if I could share it with you. Yes, I think here it is. All right. Do you see it right? Yes. All right. So the Council of Europe, for recent couple of decades, starting from end of last century, became involved in mediation, good practices compilation, or defining various principles and suggesting to include mediation in system for dispute resolution. And in this work, there has been, well, tremendous progress done in recent 20 years. The Council of Europe and its European Commission for Efficiency of Justice has become a powerful think tank in field of mediation, issuing various recommendations on how to strengthen elements of mediation, compiling comparative good practices and disseminating these good practices. By two channels. One of the channels is elaborating and confirmation and distribution of various instruments on mediation development, such as recommendations, guidelines, handbooks, and some other tools. And another angle is participation in international cooperation projects with individual members of the Council of Europe. Currently, there are 47 members of the Council of Europe and some other countries, neighboring Council of Europe, where individual support mediation development for in the particular country, in the particular nation, is tailored and is provided. But let me start with some, well, philosophical remarks. What lies behind the mediation development exercise? What's the rationale and what's the philosophy of mediation development? In these 20 years of the Council of Europe activities, I think we realized that the development of mediation adds significantly to progress and advancement of dispute resolution culture, not only in sense of inclusion some, well, additional methods of dispute resolution, but also with advancement of traditional conventional dispute resolution through courts and some other extrajudicial bodies. Because presence of mediation and knowledge of mediation as one of the tools and methodology of dispute resolution gives a better understanding to main players of legal conflict resolution, such as lawyers, judges, and other involved persons about conflict theory, about how they can be solved in using variety of methods. Mediation offers one of the methods, well, principally aimed at win-win solution. And, well, normally, if judges and lawyers are not educated about that type of solutions, which are available about that type of methods, so it might be quite difficult for them to realize how to efficiently apply it, how to efficiently even apply negotiation techniques and tactics. So the Council of Europe for the recent couple of decades has elaborated more than 20, well, 22 to be exact, instruments in relation to mediation development. I will touch upon these various instruments very briefly and try to walk you through them at a later stage. All of them, they're accessible via internet, so they are public know-how. which is distributed, and also some additional well, explanatory notes and other materials can be found in this particular site, which I included reference in this particular slide. As I already told to you, Council of Europe not only elaborates and promulgates various recommendations based on international good practices and comparative analysis, but also takes in recent, well, I'd say decade, very active role in supporting individual member states in the mediation development exercise. For example, in Turkey, couple of large-scale projects have been implemented in relation to strengthening mediation system, improvement of law, awareness raising, training of mediators, and improvement of various other elements. The first large-scale project started in 2014. It has ended in 2017. As a result of this project, the mandatory mediation system was launched, and currently Turkey produces the largest amount of mediations per year worldwide. So currently, Turkey's production of mediation is around 1 million of mediation cases per year. So you can imagine the scale, and definitely with such a scale, lots of problems occur. And from time to time, Turkey also turned to the Council of Europe and the CEPEJ for supporting them in sense of improvement of various other elements, such as one of the last exercise was done in assistance to Turkey to relocate the disciplinary system of mediators, improve it, also to establish better elements of family and better presence of family mediation, and strengthen mediation centers, and well, also strengthen various other elements. There are lots of other, well, examples. I'll very briefly touch upon some of them, more significant one. For example, in Georgia, the project is ongoing, and the Council of Europe support Georgian authorities and mediation stakeholders with advice and support in assessment of various elements of Georgian mediation systems, such as mediators training and strengthening of our training, such as mediators referral by judges and strengthening of mediation referrals, such as certification of victim offender mediators and strengthening of victim offender mediation certification system, etc. So various elements can be included as an assistance of this international player, the Council of Europe. In Azerbaijan, also very interestingly, last year, the project has finished, which produced recommendations for Azerbaijani mediation and other authorities, how to improve their mediation case management online system, what to include in it, and how to improve statistical accountancy of mediation, and what elements of key performance indicators could be improved in relation to accountancy of statistical figures of mediation performance in the country. So, and for Azerbaijan, for example, it's also very important because Azerbaijan also has a mandatory mediation system. It established the system with assistance of international donors as well. And some of the elements of that system, they do not function perfectly. And coming to the site, an assessment of how do they function and providing recommendations is very helpful for such countries as Azerbaijan. In Latvia, a couple of projects, pilot projects of mediation also have been launched and have been finished, testing possibilities, how to increase number of mediations and how to strengthen the whole system and improve awareness of various players of mediation, such as lawyers and judges as well. In Albania, more general assessment of a system has been finished in a couple of years, and currently investigation is being done in what in particular can be offered to the country. And for example, one of the suggestions is to strengthen institutional system of Albanian mediation by establishing mediation council with the presence and participation of various mediation stakeholders. And Albania is currently considering that this step shall be taken, and what assistance from the international donors such as Council of Europe might be necessary in order to help them to move forward. I will not mention other countries because there are many of them. One of the recent development, for example, in Bulgaria, starting from July of this year, they intended to launch a mandatory in-court mediation system. And individual CEPEJ experts, including myself, we were invited to help them to strengthen in-court mediators training, but apparently it came out that on the 1st of July, Bulgarian Constitutional Court declared some provisions of in-court mediation, mandatory in-court mediation as unconstitutional. And currently discussion is going on whether any assistance of the Council of Europe will be necessary in order to overcome these critiques by the Constitutional Court, which nullifies some provisions of mediation law establishing mandatory mediation system, because mediation community and judicial community is also ready to launch while trying to mitigate all the negative effects of this Constitutional Court decision, but definitely some improvements of the system, including legislative scope of the system, is necessary because the Constitutional Court pointed out some of the elements which, in the Constitutional Court's opinion, did not go in line with the Bulgarian Constitution. So these amendments are necessary in order for the system launch, and most probably it will take well, at least several months, if not longer, in order for Bulgaria to recover and to move back on track with introduction of this mandatory in-court mediation system with successful launch. Because all other elements, such as readiness and preparation of courts, preparation of in-court mediators, their selection, their training, was almost finished, so everything was ready to the launch. But the Constitutional Court stepped in and told that, well, there are some issues with the constitutionality of the system, which shall be revised before the launch of the system. So these are only several examples, but there are more. The Council of Europe and CEPEJ has been actively involved in various assessments of mediation, national laws, or various other elements, and definitely also takes part in various mediation awareness raising efforts, such as, well, your forum as well, when invited. On the national scale, let me tell you, well, my personal opinion, but this is not only my opinion, but also opinion of some of my colleagues who participate quite frequently on mediation national scale development exercises in various countries of the European continent and neighboring countries, that normally development of mediation efforts and activities from a standpoint of main mediation stakeholders look like in mediation on national scale. And in sense of style of this mediation, I would say that transformative mediation style shall be applied. And in the wording of the authors of this transformative mediation style, shifts of empowerment and recognition, not of the parties, but of the stakeholders of mediation system shall be done in order to improve functioning of mediation on the national scale. And the Council of Europe, in the core of its methodology, used the AAA principle, which was originally developed in the UK, which emphasizes focus on 3 elements of mediation systems, such as availability, accessibility, and awareness. And all these elements are interrelated, and there are lots of, well, things which hide behind these three notions of AAA. Well, looking at each of these elements and going deep in the details of these elements, on the national scale mediation development exercise, well, you should identify, so what is necessary, what is the vision, and what can be done in order to move forward. And why it is mediation? Mediation, because normally you dig out and you find that there are different interests, there are different viewpoints of various stakeholders. There are different understanding how the system shall move forward, shall develop. Sometimes different, well, economical interests, etc. And in order to go forward, in order for the system to progress, the stakeholders have to agree. They have to they have to elaborate the joint vision of various elements which can malfunction or which can the obstacle of mediation development. Sometimes invitation of international experts such as Council of Europe experts might be very helpful, because such think tanks as the Council of Europe has lots of experience on how it was done successfully in many countries. And also we have lots of experience what failures were faced by different countries in settling one or another issue of mediation system and their elements. Another point I would like to also to point to you that who are the main stakeholders of mediation? Who are the main gatekeepers of mediation? And here I could tell that one of the most important group of stakeholders of mediation are lawyers. So recent studies show that say of lawyers whether to use mediation, whether the system of mediation will grow or not is very important. For example, Bulgarian example that I presented to you. It was Bar Association who challenged mediation laws in front of the Constitutional Court. In the final result, as I told to you, the Constitutional declared certain provisions of mediation law as unconstitutional. Yes, and on the individual scale, if lawyer to the party will tell, I do not believe in mediation, it is not worth of using and wasting your time, parties will not go to mediation. But on the other hand, if lawyer will tell, I believe in mediation and it is very useful instrument that we should try in order to save your time and your effort, your expense in litigating this case in court for several years. We can try to close it in several months, yes. And I will help you, and I know how to help you here. So it would be the modern approach of lawyers, and that's what Council of Europe also emphasized in cooperation with various lawyers associations such as CCBA or Council of Lawyers of the European Union. We together developed some instruments in helping lawyers to change their approach and change their mentality and instrumentalize mediation in their daily work. But there are also other visible and significant stakeholders, legislators, because if legislators will adopt mediation law and if legislators will include in mediation law provisions on mandatory mediation and mandatory referral to mediation, that will boom mediation numbers statistically. And definitely it will create lots of other problems, but it might very significantly affect mediation system. Judges and mediators are also, not to forget, they're also very important players. So parties as well, but I say from a broader scale mediation system assessment, lawyers, legislators, judges, and mediators are the main groups of stakeholders who should be involved in designing the general vision of mediation system development and trying to agree together. Because if there is disagreement between these stakeholders, a group of these stakeholders, you should see, you could see various, malfunctioning incidents such as I told you in Bulgaria recently on the 1st of July, yes? And here I will very briefly walk you from a Council of Europe, through the Council of Europe instruments on mediation development, and I will try to answer your question, Oksana, in relation to what instruments might be used by Ukrainian authorities and by Ukrainian stakeholders. So the strategical main instruments which encompass the main principles of functioning of mediation in various domains such as family, administrative, civil, and criminal are included in the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers recommendations in field of mediation. There are 4 of them. They are listed here. All of them are available on the internet. And noteworthy that the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers in the beginning of each of the recommendation encourages member states to facilitate use of mediation in the respective field. Definitely keeping to the specific principles, specific safeguards, etc., which shall be safe, which shall be qualitative, etc. But it's very important that the Council of Europe as such from the top there, recommendations issued bodies such as Committee of Ministers tells to all member states, please facilitate use of mediation in all the fields. Another instrument developed recently in 2007 was CEPEJ, or European Commission for Efficiency of Justice strategy roadmaps. So what can be done to improve mediation development and presence of principles included in the Committee of Ministers' recommendations? So how to engage various stakeholders, what to do, mediation funding exercise, what particular elements of mediation awareness, availability, and accessibility can be engaged in order to improve functioning of the system and presence of mediation in the country, scale, and ensuring at the same time quality of mediation. There are lots of information provided here. Because of lack of time, I'm not going to delve into details, but reading of any of these instruments, which are very short, would be very helpful to any stakeholders of mediation, such as Ministry of Justice, Mediators Association, or Lawyers Association, to understand the broad concept on how to move forward with mediation development and improvement exercise on the country level. Another instrument which was developed and which gave birth out of a cooperation project is Mediation Development Toolkit, consisting of areas, tools targeted and improvement of various elements of mediation, such as legislative background, awareness, statistical assessment, etc. So all other 15 tools of the Council of Europe can be summarized under this heading as Mediation Development Toolkit. It started its elaboration in 2016. The Council of Europe still continues to complement this toolkit. The last tool was launched in 2022. Is a handbook or guideline on mediation development in administrative matters, and I know that you are going to touch upon this tool later on, so I'm not going to very in detail delve in this particular toolkit. And we have very interesting tool specifically targeting lawmaking, mediation lawmaking, which is European Handbook for Mediation Lawmaking. This tool is designed specifically for ministries of justice, parliaments, and other, of course, stakeholders, giving you a compendium of best practices on the basis of 18 good practices in various 18 member states, and also some other international practices. And this compendium has a main body of recommendations for legislators, what to do and what not to do in field of lawmaking, in the field of mediation, with explanatory memorandum. I believe for Ukraine, this tool might be very useful. Luiza dropped me an email yesterday that you are discussing whether to allow or not to allow use of mediation in domestic violence cases, and whether it's compatible with Istanbul Convention. So opening this tool on the very first page in the main body, you will find one. So yes, it is compatible. You can do it. And I would say it's recommended to do it with certain safeguards, with certain peculiarities, that you cannot mandate use of mediation, especially for victim of domestic violence case. And you cannot refer mandatory then to mediation if victim objects. But if victim does not object, or if victim tells, I want mediation, that's totally compatible with all the principles enshrined in Istanbul Convention as well. But in order to have quality and safety in mediation, you need to train mediators how to work with that particular situation. So there are, specific other safeguards shall be elaborated and installed in the system. But you will find answers in that compendium, not only to this particular question, but lots of questions in relation to how mediation laws shall be promulgated, what they shall include or what shall not be included. And I can tell you that the idea to designing of this particular handbook, it was originated because the Council of Europe has been requested in many instances to assess the mediation laws in various individual countries, what to do, what to include there, etc., in their drafting stage. And the Council of Europe in the very end decided, let's put together a compendium, let's make a comparative analysis, research, let's identify best practices, and let's issue a concentrate on what is the best practices, what is not, for reading of any of lawmakers in mediation on European continent and not only. So I think that this tool could be very useful for Ukraine as well, as long as you're discussing you're contemplating whether to improve your mediation law in certain vector or not. There are also a number of other tools. I will very briefly walk you through. I will not stop as I did with European Handbook, but if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them, whether in this forum or later on. So there are a number of tools of mediation and awareness raising, because as I mentioned to you, it is very important for the stakeholders of mediators, such as lawyers, judges, other lawyers, notaries, enforcement agents, to change their mentality and attitude towards mediation, to instrumentalize mediation in their daily work. So the specific tools are designed in order how to do it, how to move forward with raising awareness, with very particular suggestion what to include in training programs for lawyers in order to change their mentality, in order to transform their approach towards mediation. And there is also another tool which is on top, frequently asked questions on mediation. You can just copy paste any part of it. It has quite elaborated answers to various questions on basis questions of mediation. So what is the benefit of mediation to the parties? What is the benefit of mediation to judges? What is the benefit of mediation to lawyers? You can easily find your answers there, and if you want to include in your brochures, you can just copy and paste it in your brochure. And we see that this particular tool is very useful and is used more and more in the practice in realities. Another angle is encouraging use of mediation. So how to increase numbers of mediation. And in that particular sense, there is a specific targeted instrument, Guide to Mediation for Lawyers, designed together with CCBA, this Council of Law Bars, Bar Associations of the European Union, giving particular guidance for lawyers how to change their approach, how to change their attitude towards mediation, how to instrumentalize mediation in their daily work. And there are also tools targeted on judges, how to establish a court mediation pilot, what to manage, what parameters, what taxonomy of various parameters shall be observed and shall be measured in the pilot projects. And how to refer cases to mediation, how to do it properly. So Guide on Judicial Referral to Mediation is very instrumental as well. And in recent years, we see more and more interest in that instruments. For example, last month, I did a training for judges in Albania on judicial referral, and my colleagues a couple of months ago did a training on judicial referral, efficient judicial referral to mediation to judges in Georgia. So we see that this tool also gives more and more popularity. Ensuring high quality of mediation. So first of all, training. I mean, you need to train professionals. You need to train good professionals to provide quality service. So that's very important. And this joint tool together with International Mediation Institute was designed in order to give understanding for each of member states and training providers. So what is the quality training of mediation? What are the parameters? What shall be included in the training? How to design programs? How to implement these programs, what shall be included in the training staff, etc. So you can find lots of answers to these questions in that particular instrument. And European Code of Conduct for Mediation Providers, which is compatible with European Code of Conduct for mediators, because from 2004, there is a Code of Conduct for mediators present. And it is very popular on the European continent, but there is nothing on the European scale on what code of conduct mediated providers shall apply. So the Council of Europe decided to fill this gap and issued a code of conduct for mediation providers, which shall be applied together with the European Code of Conduct for mediators. Statistics. If you do not collect statistics of mediation, if you do not do it properly, you try to, guide your ship with closed eyes. So it's not possible. it's not modern. You should collect the data, you should collect the significant data, which shall identify significant parameters of functioning of mediation system in order to have the basis for your decision making. And the Council of Europe gives you a framework and baseline mediation statistic frame, baseline grid, which it suggests to implement at each national country, national level, and also for each mediation provider to stick to this grid in order to have a harmonized statistics and to measure the main performance indicators to understand how healthy is your mediation system of national scale, or how healthy is mediation particular system and particular scheme of the particular mediation provider. And there are also some tools for harmonizing the process, some suggestion of model agreements on mediation, on referral of dispute to mediation, settlement agreements, feedback questionnaire, which also can be very easily utilized in various mediation schemes. And normally it is also done, and we observe popularity of this tool as well in recent years. And the last one, I'm not going to stop here, of mediation and administrative matters, a guide or a handbook on how to promote mediation for administrative matters, but you are going to touch upon this tool later on, so I'm not going to comment on this further. So this is it. Thank you. If Ukraine authorities or Ukraine other stakeholders, such Mediation Academy or Bar Association, would need any assistance from the Council of Europe experts, I believe we will be ready to help and to give you a better understanding how these tools were developed, how to implement it. And there are lots of questions which are not answered in the tools, and the Council of Europe also is ready to answer and to provide additional assistance if need be. So thanks a lot, and I wish you success with your forum and the development exercises of mediation in Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Rimantas, for being with us today. You know, thank you for highlighting all those details of what the Council of Europe and CEPEJ have done together. The Council of Europe is trying to support us as much as possible in our development of mediation and other ADRs. Mediation development is important from the standpoint of European integration, so the Council of Europe has provided all the tools. There's all the toolkit, so grab and do it. From our side, Ukraine is quite well aware of all those tools, and we've been using them so much on a regular basis. I think we were lucky because our previous attempts to pass the mediation law failed. Those bills were registered in the parliament since 2010, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And in 2016, similarly, we failed to pass the law. But this gave us a push when we were working on the 2021 draft law. We already had this lawmaking tool that you've just mentioned. And our new law is fully compliant with what you have described there in the context of definitions and in the context of no limitation to mediation in cases of family violence or domestic violence. We're so much grateful to you for these tools. For us, this was a very strong, so to say, roadmap. We were benchmarking on this at different levels, including in our communication with the judicial bodies and many other stakeholders. It is my pleasure now to hand over the floor to Mihailo Shumilo. Mihailo is in charge of the High Council of Justice's Secretariat. So, Mihailo, in the context of the judicial system, I wanted to ask you, what is the attitude to mediation and how you can envisage its development in the context of cooperation with the courts? So please. Over to you.
Дякую вам, шановна пані
Thank you so much,
Луїзо.
Louisa.
Доброго дня, шановна
Good morning
медіаційна
and good afternoon,
спільнота.
dear
Я
mediation
вас вітаю
community.
дійсно
I
сьогодні
want to
разом з вами.
congratulate
Сказали,
you
що ми робимо
on
таку,
the
якби,
fact that today we
невеличкий
announced
підсумок 30-річної роботи.
just a
І це
30th
насправді
anniversary
фантастично, тому що
of
саме
mediation. And this is
завдяки
fantastic
кожному
because thanks
такому
to
відданому прихильнику
every
медіації, кожному
dedicated
з вас фактично ми
proponent
маємо
of
ті
mediation. I
результати,
mean,
які
every one of
сьогодні
you,
є.
we can be
Можливо,
proud of the
хотілося б,
results
звичайно,
that
щоб
we have
закон
today.
був прийнятий
Of course, we
раніше.
wanted
Можливо,
this law to
хотілося б,
be
щоб
passed
більше десь були
earlier
врегульовані
on.
якісь аспекти
Maybe we
медіації,
wanted to
але тим не
settle some of the
менше,
mediation aspects much better than they
всі
are
ви і
right
ми
now.
разом
But
є
nevertheless,
дотичними
all of
до
us
розбудови цієї
had something
екосистеми
to do
медіації.
with the development of
Очевидно,
this
що це
mediation
насправді дуже
ecosystem.
важлива історія
And
для
apparently, this
будь-якої
story is very
демократичної
important for
правової
any
держави,
democracy,
тому що медіація, я
since
думаю, не мені
mediation,
вам
and I
розповідати,
think it's
медіація
not
це
me
завжди про
who should tell you
примирення.
about
Саме
it.
головне, що
Mediation is
сторони після
crucial. The
медіаційної
most
процедури
important thing
зберігають
is
свої
after
думки
mediation,
і
the
виходять
parties
в обоє
have
сторін і переходять
self-determination and
переможцями.
they
Це найважливіше.
get
Звичайно,
the
що
relief
судова
from the
гілка влади
conflict in an
має в
amicable manner.
своєму,
Of
скажімо
course,
так,
the
інструментарії
judiciary
дещо інші завдання,
needs
хоча
to pursue its own
судовими
tools
рішеннями інколи
and its
можна
practice.
досягнути так само
However,
цих речей.
it's not always the case that
Я
through
хотів
courts
би
we can
сказати,
reach the same
що
consensus.
дійсно сьогодні і пан Манфредес говорив, і
Mr.
інші наші
Manfredas has
учасники,
already
що
talked
питання
about this, and the other
медіації це вже
participants
не
as well, that
просто
the mediation
питання
is not just an issue of
внутрішнього, скажімо так, якогось сегменту, дуже
internal
вузького,
or domestic
вузькоспеціалізованого і
or
так далі.
local segment.
Дійсно, ми зараз готуємося до
Truly, we
двосторонніх
are now
зустрічей,
getting
які
ready for
відбудуться в
bilateral
вересні
meetings that are
місяці.
going to take
Ми
place
будемо
this
готувати дорожню
September.
карту щодо
We're going to be
європейської
developing the
інтеграції.
European
Далі будуть
integration
планові
roadmap, and then
на
the
основі
action
дорожньої
plan will
карти.
follow
І
based on
окремо
the
там
roadmap.
виділені
And
сегменти
individually, there is
вирішення,
one
альтернативного
segment,
вирішення
which is
спорів.
called
І, звичайно, що там
ADR,
буде
Alternative
окремий
Dispute
сегмент
Resolution,
саме
and
присвячений
for sure
медіації.
there's going to be
І
part dedicated to
ми будемо
mediation.
активно над цим
No doubt about
працювати.
that
Вища рада
whatsoever. We're going to be actively working on this. The
скажімо
High
так,
Council of Justice
очолює, умовно
takes
кажучи, очолює,
lead
організовує, скажімо
in
так, цей сегмент саме
organizing
в
this
23-му
segment
розділі переговорних
regarding negotiation chapter
переговорів.
23.
І тому питання медіації
And
це
therefore,
вже питання,
mediation is
зокрема,
probably
що хотів би на
one
чому
of the most
наголосити,
important
питання,
issues.
зокрема, і
And
євроінтеграції
that's
країн.
important
Тобто воно
contributor
вже
to the
сьогодні
Ukraine's European
держава Україна
integration.
повинна продемонструвати
Today, the
те,
state
що
of
вона
Ukraine
вже
has to
зробила.
demonstrate what it
І,
has already
власне,
done.
це те, що
And
пан Рімантас
what
щойно
Mr.
доповідав,
Rimantas
якраз
just told
ці
us about
документи, які
those
Рада
documents,
Європи
those
підготувала,
tools
вони
that the
так само
Council of
для нас
Europe has
будуть так
designed and
зване
developed
soft law, і ми
will
будемо
be
їх
for
знову
us
ж таки
as
дивитися
a
і
soft law.
говорити, як ми
We're going to be
будемо
referring
рухатися
to
у
those
подальшій
and to
поглибленій,
see how we
скажімо так,
can move
поширеній
forward in
медіації
this
тих стандартів
in-depth
медіації, які є в
dissemination
країнах
of
Ради Європи.
mediation
І,
standards
звичайно, що
that
ці
exist in
стандарти
the
так
Council
само
of
є
Europe
в
nations. And of
країнах
course, those
Європейського
standards are
Союзу.
abided by the
Що
European Union member
стосується,
states.
скажімо так,
Well, with
медіації
regards
і
to
судової гілки
mediation
влади,
and
то я
the
хочу сказати, що
judiciary,
судова гілка влади
I have to tell you that
безумовно вбачає в медіації один
the
із дуже
judiciary
великих, скажімо так,
envisages
потенціалів.
great potential in mediation. It has huge capacity, they think. It's not a secret for anyone that we survived crisis in the judiciary. I mean, there's primarily human resource crisis. The courts are understaffed. The court staff is not completely there. And we cannot resolve the issue overnight. This is a task for many years to come. And those problems were exacerbated by the Russian aggression over the last 2+ years. So mediation will be a relief, a major relief for courts, especially for the trial courts. Naturally, this issue has been discussed very largely, and they already consider some of those most probable mediation cases. I mean, cases that are best resolved through mediation, like family labor, commercial disputes, and others, maybe. This is going to reduce caseload, and this is one of those key aspects why mediation is so important. This, however, may be a very simplistic, wishful thinking from the judiciary, but in general, mediation is about building legal culture. This is about building trust between citizens. This is about trust to mediation, etc. That's why it seems to me in this context, there is a lot of work to be still done, but nobody stops at this point. We never stopped at this framework law on mediation, and right now there are processes underway to amend the other legal acts. For instance, I'm involved in the development of the new draft labor code. Naturally, there'll be chapters on individual labor dispute resolution, and mediation is going to play a huge role there. I know there is draft law on collective labor disputes. I'm not yet ready to tell whether it's going to be a separate law or it's going to be integrated in the future labor code, and as well, they have included mediation into that scope. What seems to be doubtful, or thing that requires more detailed discussion probably, that at the level of legislation, we clearly define what mediation is, what is labor mediation, who is the mediator in labor disputes. But it seems to me mediation is exactly the right tool, where at the level of law, we may not provide such a great level of detail, and probably that's redundant. But what's important is building awareness in a society about mediation and opportunities mediation provides. Because whereas at the very beginning, the main objective was to tell about mediation to judges, and many judges were involved in so many different training sessions. They've already developed their skills and acquired some of the experience in conducting mediation. They understand what it is and how important this may be. On top of that, we need to continue working on disseminating those important knowledge, information, and skills about its capacity and what it can do to the Ukrainian citizens. I'd like to admit the proactive role of the mediators community, like Luiza Romanadze. And if I can share my screen and I can see I have it, I would like to show you something. Since today, the main information on mediation can be found on the Ukraine's judiciary's website. This is the judicial power in Ukraine, as it literally translates, following the address court.gov.ua. You can see mediation as one of the flagships. And here you can find key aspects and basic issues. So you can always find information there about what mediation is. And here briefly we can find information with references to the legal acts, etc. So regarding mediation, again, but this is not the end of story. Why do I need mediation? You can find a lot of useful information. There are designated mediators, and we actually red flagged some of the main reasons why one should go to mediation and how mediation correlates with the judicial dispute resolution. In a nutshell, you can read some of that information over there.
Далі там, до речі, я не наголосив на цьому, але далі так само, як знайти медіатора, ви можете всі ці подивитися, там так само
there on the same website. There is information available to citizens as well. Of course, these are just first steps that we take. Clearly, we need to work harder on this. But I think ideally,
for
this court.gov.ua, that's the website maintained by the judiciary in Ukraine. But similarly, we need to have this shortcut on the websites of each and every court of any jurisdiction and any instance, so that citizens, whenever they go to the official court websites, could get primary information over there on that spot. Because for citizens, what's important is to get information not just available somewhere, but on the official websites. That's important. I'm not going to be taking too much of your time because I can see there are more speakers scheduled here, and this is just the beginning of the forum. I don't want to keep you bored. So once again, I want to thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you very much for inviting me. And let's not stop at this point because 30 years is just the beginning. There is so much work that's been done. The journey was quite long, but I think the most difficult part is over. Right now, we are into development, improvement. And we need to contribute to the development of the mediators community and incorporating best international practices. And a very important contribution into the development of legal culture, it is mediation again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear participants, and thanks very much to the organizers for the invitation. We want to thank you very much, Mihailo, for being with us and for having demonstrated how much proficient the dialogue there is between the mediators community and the judiciary. And we want to thank you very much that as of today, on your websites, there is this information available. You were so modest about it, as you underlined how it works, but actually that looks brilliant. Actually, on any court's website in Ukraine, in any jurisdiction, in any instance, whether it is trial or appeal, you can find this tab with information on mediation, just exactly like Mihailo has demonstrated just now. It is now available on every court's website. And to attract even more attention, there is a dedicated banner downstairs on the website. It's part of the communication strategy that was suggested last year, so that anyone can click here and go to the same information with those frequently asked questions and answers. We're so much grateful. I think this is an important contribution and an important step and a crucial step forward to have this tailor-made and one-stop approach. I don't think it stands as a barrier to the judiciary. One can add any additional information if the courts decide so. This is kind of normal already. This is a normal means of communication. That's the way the courts have to talk to citizens in Ukraine. We're so much grateful to you for this step forward. And on my own behalf, I'd like to thank those pilot courts, and that has to be thanked to the USA right now. It used to be New Justice Program, now it is Justice for All. 6 years ago, we were opening mediation rooms at courts, and as far as I know, they're still operating in those various courts. And when those moot courts or pilot courts, we're trying to carefully add that information on their websites, and they created dedicated pages on mediation, while now we have very strong outcome. Let me thank you so much, Mihailo, for having implemented this. I know you were involved in the draft law on mediation, and you can sense how powerful it is, how important it is for Ukraine. And I have to tell that this is the right person in the right place in the right time. Thank you. So now let me continue and hand the floor over to Oksana Sulima. Madam Sulima is Deputy Director General of the Director for the Development of Social Services at the Social Policies Ministry. Why are we having an honor to hear Oksana? That's because mediation is one of the basic social services, and it was Oksana who's been taking care of mediation as a social service. Thank you, Oksana. Thank you so much, Luiza. Good morning and good afternoon, dear colleagues. Honestly, I also want to express my words of gratitude for the invitation of our ministry to this kind of discussion on how mediation evolves in Ukraine. And what's been said today, that at least 30 years seems to be quite a long time, but it seems to me that we are just at the beginning of this process. A lot has to be done. in the future, and a lot of things have to be implemented. But making conclusions on mediation, I have to tell you how this social security ended up with mediation. It was clear for everybody that we had been always taking care of social service developments. This is the professional activity that we do. We need to train our people to help others in difficult life circumstances where people cannot take care of themselves. And actually, those situations can be absolutely diverse, from health all the way to losing contacts with family and friends. Those aspects can be so different. And in building this diverse service delivery framework to different categories of population, we started working with national minorities. They had their particular and specific problems. They had challenges in access to government agencies to get services from them. And that's exactly through the national minorities that we started to, and ethnic minorities, we started running those pilot projects with mediation involved. At that time, in 2016, we approved the mediation as a standard social service, and then mediators turned to us and said, that's not about that. Mediation is absolutely about a different thing. This is more about dispute resolution. And since 2016, we started to actively cooperate with mediators themselves by diving into mediation much more as and started considering it as an alternative dispute resolution technique or method. We had two stages in that mediation service. The first one was mediation that was handled by a social worker, and if something went wrong and the social worker could not handle the dispute, then we involved a mediator in the second phase. So mediation itself was in the second round of the service delivery. Of course, not all the service providers could deliver this service of mediation. We have 4,000 in the register, but they were so diverse. They had to do with the specific nature of every service provider, depending on who they delivered the service to, what kind of services had to be delivered. When we're talking about elderly people, for example, there is more emphasis made on home care. When we talk about former convicts, there are different types of services, but our social service delivery centers, they are the ones to take care of families with children, and they provide support to those families. They're the ones who face most of the family dispute situations, and they were the most active in mediation over the last couple of years. Having analyzed this 5-year statistic, we've seen that this mediation service was available to 12,000 people on an annual basis. But this service was dual in 2 stages. We could not even speak about the mediation itself only, but with the changes to the law on mediation and with the changes to the law on social services, where mediation is distinguished as a separate social service, as an individual one, this now gives us an opportunity to work with mediation as a social service, as a self-standing one. And this indeed is an opportunity to help even more people. So in 2021, amendments were introduced to the law on social services, and we kick-started the procedure of revision of our national service delivery standard. I have to mention here that the mediation service itself is designated as the baseline or basic service, which has to be guaranteed by the local governments, and it has to be funded from local budgets.
Повертаючись до
Coming back
розробки
to
імплементації нормативної нашої
the development and
бази,
implementation of the legal framework,
я тут
I have to admit
хочу
that
дуже
today,
подякувати
and let me thank
спільноті
again
медіаторів,
the mediators
асоціації
community,
медіації, пані Луїзі, пані
the
Катерині,
association
за
Luiza
дуже
and
активне
Katerina
включення в процес
for their
написання
active
медіації,
engagement
тому
in
що,
this
в
process.
принципі, сам стандарт
Because actually the
це
standard itself
нормативний акт, але який
is again a legal
затверджує
act
дуже деталізований
which
опис надання
contains
послуг.
very detailed
Починаючи
service
від
delivery
того,
description,
як воно
starting from
організовується, хто
how the
приймає
service has to be
рішення,
organized,
кому
who's
воно
making a
надається,
decision, who the service is
як
available
часто
to,
і які
how
зустрічі
often and how
мають
frequently are we
відбуватися,
supposed to have
які
meetings
заходи
with the
мають здійснюватися в
clientele,
межах цієї
what kind
послуги.
of
Тому,
activities
коли
we
ми
have to
почали
include into the
виписувати
service delivery
цей стандарт,
practice.
насправді
So when
ми
we
дуже
started
багато
describing
працювали,
the standard, we were
щоб
really concerned
це все було виписано,
because we
відбувалося
wanted
дуже
to include
правильно.
everything
Щоб
in a correct
виписати
manner.
саме ту
We
процедуру,
wanted to
яка
describe the
стане
procedure
помічною
in
для
the right way
медіаторів.
that will be
Цей
helpful both
інструмент
for both
має бути
mediators and their
реалістичним і
clients.
помічним. Тобто, щоб
This
кожен
tool has to
медіатор
be
міг взяти цей
instrumental,
стандарт, і він дійсно був йому
my
у нагоді
predecessor
і
has
не
said.
заважав працювати, а
We want
тільки
it
давав
to be a
максимальну
helpful
допомогу
hand
в
and not an
організації
obstacle.
своєї роботи. Тому,
That's why
власне,
we're
сьогодні
trying
ми вже
hard to
маємо
develop it the way it is.
наказ.
So
Наказом
today we already have a
міністерства
decree of
затверджено
the
зміни
Social
в
Policy Ministry
класифікатор, і
to
вже в
amend the
нашому
classification.
класифікаторі
And already in the
з'явилась
updated
нова
classification,
окрема
we
послуга
have a
медіації,
separate service,
окремо від
self-standing
посередництва.
mediation service.
Ми сьогодні цим нашим наказом, звичайно,
With this
скасовуємо
decree, of course, we now
державний
abolish
стандарт і
the
затверджуємо
old,
два нові
outdated
про
national standard and
посередництво
approve
окремо
the
і
new
медіацію
national
окремо.
standard.
В стандарті про медіацію дуже
The
чітко
mediation standard
описується
clearly
сама процедура проведення
describes
медіації.
the
Звичайно,
mediation
вона
procedure.
абсолютно все
Of
відповідає
course, it's all
всім
compliant
нормам і
with
положенням
all the
закону
norms
про
and
медіацію.
provisions
Більше
of the
того,
mediation law.
цей стандарт також враховує і
Moreover,
принципи
the
і
standard
організацію
also
надання
includes
соціальної
the
послуги, і
principles
тут
of
йде дуже, на мій погляд, таке
social
гарне поєднання
services.
принципів надання соцпослуг і принципів надання медіації, і добровільності, і
So it
рівності
has to be
прав,
voluntary,
і
it has to be the
самовизначеності,
equality of arms.
неупередженості, дотримання
It has to be free
людини,
from
отримувача соціальних послуг. Це на сьогодні є надважливим.
bias, I mean,
Збережена і етапність
and there
проведення
must be
медіації. Тобто ми
self-determination.
говоримо і про
We included all
підготовку
the
до
stages,
медіації, про
like preparing for
медіаційно-оціночні
mediation,
зустрічі.
for
І
the
важливо
evaluation
під
meetings,
час цих
etc.
зустрічей
So
визначати медіабельність,
it is
визначати
very
ті
important
ризики,
to
з
define the
якими
risks,
може стикатися
assess them,
медіатор, якщо раптом
and also
виявляються
evaluate
якісь
mediability,
постави
like we
домашнього
call it.
насильства, або взагалі є ситуація домашнього
Because we
насильства.
used to have these two components,
Власне, і
intermediacy
завершення
or
медіації,
and
підписання
mediation.
медіаційних угод
I
за
would call the first one
результатами
in
і так
betweening
далі.
rather than
Важливим тут так
mediation.
само є, що,
But it's
власне,
very important to
стандартом
also
про
underline that in that
визначається
newly
і
established standard,
періодичність проведення
we have the
зустрічей,
frequency of
строки
meetings and
проведення
interviews,
зустрічі,
a
тривалість
duration
кожної
of
зустрічі, в тому числі
each and every
медіаційної.
meeting,
Тобто
including
є
for
список
mediation
документів,
purposes.
які ми
There
маємо
are document
дотримуватися
templates that
медіатор.
we
Тобто
can
більше такий,
mediators
знаєте,
can now
на
use.
мій погляд,
So in my
більш
view, this
детальний,
very
описовий
detailed
документ,
description
який
and a
дійсно
very
може
substantial
бути
document that can really be
помічним для
helpful
медіаторів, для
for
того, щоб нова
mediators
була ця
to
медіація
make sure they
організована
do a great
якісно і
job
правильно.
in
І,
a quality manner.
звичайно, що є показники
Of course,
оцінки
there are
якості
quality
надання
assurance
цієї послуги.
KPIs as
На
well.
сьогоднішній день наш наказ
Today,
знаходиться
our
на останньому
decree
етапі.
is
Він
at the
перебуває в
last
Мін'юсті на
stage.
державній
It is
адміністрації.
submitted to the
Ми
Ministry of
очікуємо
Justice and will
повернення
soon be
вже
registered
державної
officially.
адміністрації
We
наказу, і
expect
це
it's going to
дасть
come
нам
back from the
можливість
state registration, and this is going to give us an
поширити,
opportunity to
розповсюдити
disseminate
наказ
and
для
promulgate
використання
this
в роботі,
decree for
але
the
прийняття
actual use.
будь-якого документу
But
є
adoption of
тільки
any
початком
document
шляху,
like this
насправді,
is just the
тільки
beginning of
початком
this
роботи,
path.
тому що
It's just the beginning of our work.
треба буде
Because
провести дуже широку інформаційно-роз'яснювальну
there
роботу.
Must
Власне,
be
сьогодні про це вже говорили.
large awareness
До
raising campaign.
кожної людини треба донести простою, доступною мовою, а
It
взагалі
has to
саму
be
ідею
in
медіації.
accessible
Що
language.
це насправді дійсно культура вирішення спорів, те, про що вже сьогодні
This is the
говорили.
culture of dispute
І
resolution,
все наше населення, кожен наш громадянин цю
and
культуру
every
має
citizen
прийняти,
has to
має зрозуміти, і
accept
вже тоді
understand and foster this culture.
Після прийняття
So after
наказу ми будемо
this
змінювати
decree
нашу
is
звітність, будемо
adopted, we're going to
запроваджувати
change our
нову
reporting
статистику,
practices.
які
We're going to be
більш важливі,
implementing the
які
new
вже можемо
statistical
побачити.
tools, and then we are
Mediaторів,
going to
які
be able to
залишалися,
see how many
власне,
mediators have been
медіацію
involved and how many
провели,
mediation
яким
sessions
спорам вона
have been
проводилася саме в
run
нашій
and what kind of
системі
disputes were
соціального
resolved.
захисту.
It's going to be, all this statistic will be
Надзвичайно
available in our
важливо
social
це
ministries
навчання. І навчання,
data. One of the most important components is training, of course. We need to train social workers and mediators, of course.
Щоб вони були обізнані,
But the social workers have to be made aware of all those nuances and peculiarities of mediation. They have to be aware of how the procedure runs and know when it can be engaged, when they can refer people to for mediation, because this timeliness is crucial as well. If a person is referred timely for mediation, then there are many more chances for efficient dispute resolution, and that support will end up in something good.
Сьогодні вже про це згадували.
We were mentioning already today, partly, or similarly, we are getting ready for this negotiation process. We had ratified the Istanbul Convention, and today we still have expert discussions underway with regards to how to correctly organize mediation, in particular in cases of domestic and family violence. Because this can not only apply to domestic and family violence, but also to other difficult situations and disputes. So to be able to correctly implement that in our Ukrainian legislation, we need to maintain this dialogue. When talking about what our ministry has been doing, then one of the important and relevant issues for us is the issue of social service delivery in general. And in order to support our communities, to make sure they have as much opportunities and possibilities as possible to support social service providers, we, of course, implemented the national centralized procurement system, because we need to respond to the full-scale invasion challenges, and we've already kick-started a process of encouraging more psychological and psychosocial support. But in the course of mediation development, including as a social service, there can be an option when services will be delivered also to help our service providers, if I understand correctly. Apart from implementing new services and with digitalization in the country, we also review the ministry's website, constantly updating and upgrading it. And we're also developing a social services portal where citizens can actually seek social services and apply for them in a very simple language. They will be able to get information about all the social services, what they're all about. And of course, there's going to be information included on mediation as well, so that people can be aware of, okay, they have an opportunity to resolve their dispute of not going to the court. Cases are many, but it seems to me this is just the beginning. It is extremely important and challenging to implement our legislation in a full-fledged manner as it is, because we have quite many legislative acts, but not always they're properly enforced. That is why, with the correct implementation and enforcement on the ground, including with properly disseminated information through various information channels, through trainings and awareness raising, this is really important. So I want to wish everyone every success in this endeavor, and let us continue to have these high-quality discussions on the forum like this one. And we will want to take care and deliver services in the best interest of our citizens. Thank you so much, Oksana. Thank you for telling us all this relevant information about the current status of mediation as a social service. And honestly, there's so many things going on today, and it's so nice that we have this great collaboration. We're so much grateful that even now, in the context of our work on the draft law on domestic violence, there was a certain pause taken by the working group to actually handle mediation to be incorporated into it. And right now, those discussions are still underway, and we're so much grateful to you for this. I have an impression from this entire panel discussion that we are all on the same page. We are responsive and hearing each other. Just in March, there were committee hearings, and with no specifically approved recommendations, the Ministry of Justice is already very active in this, and even there are certain outcomes to be proud of. And the Ministry of Social Policy is there, the High Council of Justice as well. So this is so cool. I think with our own example, those who push this issue forward, we demonstrate all the key values mediation can bring, and we demonstrate that each and every voice is important. It's important to be heard. We're ready to handle it. We are ready to jump in and do it. We're ready to understand each other. We're ready to see what kind of interests and priorities each and every stakeholder has to incorporate them in our general agenda. This will allow us to achieve greatest results possible. At this point, let us consider this panel discussion adjourned. Let me thank all the participants for being with us today. Of course, apart from my words, we're gonna disseminate written letters of gratitude to all the panel discussion participants, but there is a short information piece that I wanted to share with you right now. Well, this year we celebrate not only the 30th anniversary of mediation in Ukraine, but also the 10th anniversary of the Ukraine's Mediation Academy. This is our organization. And in this regard, Oksana, did you want to say something? That is why we introduced a special award from the Ukraine's Mediation Academy for our 10th anniversary. And I would like to present it to you and tell a bit about how it's going to work and what kind of award this is. You can see this is a reward from the Ukrainian Mediation Association. This award will be given to the Ukrainian national organizations, government agencies, and any legal entity, which, not being mediators themselves, not being an association or organization of mediators, but at the same time contributes to the mediation development and to achieve those 3 A's as the best beacon for its development.
Було видно? Добре, зараз видно, так? Видно, так?
Видно.
Дякую.
You can see it, right? Yes, we can. So that's the reward, the mediation partner. It is called, this is a stylish Ukrainian kind of reward. So it is in Ukrainian. You can see P and M. This is partner to mediation. And we have this symbol which demonstrates balance, agility, and endlessness of our belief in mediation's capacity. We're so much grateful that mediation partners are getting involved in its development in Ukraine. Today, for the first time, when we're implementing this reward, we prepared it for the first 50 individuals, our partners. I mean, organizations, those that push this sector forward, but every one of you can be nominated. Any organization can become a nominee. And you can nominate another organization, those that you cooperate with, those that you can hear information about mediation from, those that contribute to access to mediation services, those who participate in developing legal acts on mediation. This can be local government agencies or national, central level. Those can be courts, anyone. So please nominate your peers and those you cooperate with. There are four main criteria how a contribution may look like. This is either about awareness raising, access to mediation, engaging mediation in their own practice, or development of mediation in general. Please nominate your partners and yourselves. You're going to be issued those certificates and rewards. You are also going to get an electronic badge, which you can put on your website of your organization, your official authority. It's going to be an important marker for your readership and viewership. This is going to show your positive attitude to mediation, and this is going to be another awareness raising tool, because somebody may see a strange word and they may get to know what it's all about. They may want to seek more information about it. So it is my pleasure to announce that our representatives of the first panel discussion have successfully done it. They have prepared a lot of very interesting information and surprises, including recommendations and a joint decree, which is already at the last stage of signing by the Ministry of Justice. On restorative justice, we were talking about that. There's a new national standard on mediation service delivery. There's information on the judiciary's website. We want to thank you very much for this. You were the ones who were the first ones who were the first people to get these rewards. So we want to thank you very much for this. This is so valuable. And let me demonstrate the first reward with number 1 that we issued already. This is our Parliamentary Committee on Legal Policy. Thanks to them, we now have the mediation law, and we have the hearings last month. And this is an ongoing platform for discussing mediation for the sake of proper legislative and regulatory framework. Thank you. I'm here. Roman is here. Thank you. Thank you. We were going to share it with you. Similarly, we have letters of gratitude to the Ministry of Social Policy, to the Ministry of Justice, to the High Council of Justice, and even to the state-owned enterprise that was publishing all this information on the parliamentary website. We on the website already have this information. You can go and see it. I'm not going to be spending any more of your time to list all of the prize winners or award winners, I'm sorry. Here in the end, you can see there are schools and universities, there is IPR office. So we're going to share all this information. You can see all the partners, and of course, our partners will be getting this reward as well. They contribute to mediation development in Ukraine. This is the USAID's Justice for All program. There's also the EU Pravo-Justice project. There is the Council of Europe's project as well mentioned here that includes the mediation component at courts. And of course, there's the Ministry of Interior, which has invested so much effort into restorative justice agenda, and many more, of course. So please nominate others and apply yourselves. Those award winners receive lots of gratitude from ourselves, and thank you so much. This is probably it for this part, but I have 2 more announcements about Saturday. If you're planning to join us this Saturday, we plan 2 masterclasses. The first one is going to be on the unified approaches, like we call it, including on how to communicate mediation really well, what we have to deliver in terms of information, because some people may not know nothing about mediation. They may hear this strange word, and people can get lost easily in all this realm of information. There's going to be a masterclass on the basic communication skills and how to properly communicate mediation. So this is going to take place on Saturday, and on Saturday we're going to have a speaker on how to properly prepare a PowerPoint presentation on mediation, what is worth doing. So do's and don'ts, there will be all there. So this information, I'm sure, is going to be valuable not only for mediators, but also for many other stakeholders. I'm sure this masterclass is going to be very useful. But let me tell you something. In order to feel and know what's important and what's crucial, please try to take care that you have the PowerPoint software installed on your devices not older than 2016. Then you can actually practice at the same time as the speaker will be telling you all this information. This is what's going to take place in the morning on Saturday. And then after lunch, we're going to discuss more things on restorative practices. To be able to take part in the masterclass, please make sure you have at least 6 color pencils, at least one liner, 0.5 or 0.7, and a couple of markers and paper. Why I'm telling you about this right now, because if all of a sudden you don't have it, you have tomorrow and the day after, and also today. So part of it, you can take care of finding those pencils, pens, and markers. So this is it from my side. I want to thank you so much. We're a bit late as always, but anyways, I want to thank all the speakers. I want to thank my co-moderator, Oksana. Thank you. Thank you so much. I also want to thank all our technical supports, and specifically, we want to thank our incredible interpreter. Hopefully, you can read in the chat how satisfied our audience is with the translation quality, because honestly, there's an impression about a speaker that is created as well by an interpreter. Thank you. Thank you so much.